So now let's look at the one with 3 sharps. Okay, again, the last sharp is on the top space. That's the number 7. So the 1 would be the first ledger line above that would be 1. But if I go down, it should be on a space somewhere. So let's see. That's 7. The next one is 5, 3. 1 is right there on that second from the bottom space, where some people, if it were the treble clef, would call A. If that were the treble clef, they would say that's A. And indeed, 3 sharps is the key of A. 1 sharp is the key of G, which is where that landed. 2 sharps, D, which is where that landed. 3 sharps, A. 4 sharps, okay? Again, this sharp is right here on that space, on that line there. That last sharp is 7. So the space above it, which would be called E, if we did ABCs, would be where 1 is at. So this is the key of E. 4 sharps is the key of E. If we count down, that second line from the top is 7, then the next line down is 5, the next line down is 3. The bottom line would be 1, or E. So, flats. The first flat is in that middle line, which is the number 4. So where is 1?
The first space.
Yeah, the first space. Not the space below the staff, but the first space inside of the staff is the number 1. And we count from there up to that is 4, a distance of 4. Okay, the other place is, if I count from there, if that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Or I can think this, 4, the next line up is 6, and then the next line up is 1. So that's another way to find it. That would be the top line. So the bottom space and the top line are both where the number 1 is, and they both share the same name, F. The top line is F in the G clef, and the bottom space there is F in the G clef. Okay? Two of them. Okay? Now remember I said that it went the other way around the wheel. The 4th moves over to the number 1. So an interesting thing happens. That second flat there is the number 4, but if I count down, it lands on the same line as where the previous flat was at. So the second flat is the number 1. And our wheel predicted that because it said the number 4, when I bring in a new 4, it pushes this guy over to 1. So the flat before is the number 1. And that's another way to look at it. Now, that only works if you have 2 or more flats. If you only have 1 flat, what do? Well, you go back to the default. The flat is always the number 4. But this is also why jazz musicians like flats. Because they can look at the flat, and if there's 4 flats there, they look at the second flat and say, oh, that's where number 1 is, and they're often right. And that's all they do. That's the rule they live by. However, if it's an F, they don't know where the hell it is. So let's go here to the 3. Okay? With the 3, again, this is on that second space, that thing. So that's the number 4. So if I go down, 1, 2, 3, 4, the bottom line here again is going to be where 1 is, just as 3 flats puts our eye on the same line as 4 sharps did. We call this E flat actually, and the other was E, but it puts us on the same line. That bottom line now is now the number 1. And if we count from there, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's where that flat is. And again, if I want to count going upwards, guess what? I go 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, and there that second flat, the secondary flat, there happens to be the number 1. Because it got moved from 4 to 1. And the 1 got moved over to 5, so this flat here is on 5. 4, 5. See what this wheel's doing? The nice thing about this wheel is it shows you everything there is to know about music. Period. No matter how complicated music gets, it's going to break down into this little wheel, and it's either going to go every note or it's going to skip every other one, forward or backwards. And everything in music will wind up in this little wheel. That's the nice thing about this wheel. Okay, 4 flats. Well, this 4th flat here is on that line, which is 4. So if I count down, the 2nd flat is where 1 is. And if I count going up, this is 4. The next line up would be 6. And then the line above that would be 1. So one ledger line above the staff would also be where the number 1 is at. Now, I know this might be a little confusing to some of you, but you'll get used to this idea, okay? Just remember, the last flat's always 4, the last sharp's always 7, and count it out. And forget about all the shortcuts. Because the nice thing about this is, it always works. Shortcuts sometimes aren't as convenient as we'd like them to be. Okay, so that's where all those things. Now, let's look. 3 flats, which is in the treble clef called E flat. And E flat, E happens to be the bottom line, the name of the bottom line, E flat. And if you'll notice that the flat before is 1, and if we count down 1, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the bottom line becomes the number 1. And I've written over here, I've written out all the numbers on the lines. So the bottom line is 1, the 2nd line is 3, the 3rd line is 5, the 4th line is 7, the top line is the number 2. 1 ledger line above that is 4, 2 ledger lines above that is 6. Going the other direction, 1, going down a ledger line to 6, going down 2 ledger lines to 4. Why did I add the ledger lines? Because the music I'm about to give you sometimes will go below the staff. Not too low, but it will go below. Okay? Now let's take a look. So this first note is what number?
3.
3. If the bottom line is 1, that's a 3rd, right? Okay, what's the next one?
4.
4. And the next one is 5. So if we look at it this way, from here down to that line is a 3rd, from this 2nd note down to the line is a 4th, and from that other note, which is 5, down to the line is a 5, I want you to notice something. The odd numbers are on the lines, aren't they? The even numbers are on the spaces. So now I can simplify this even further and say any note that lands on a line below the high one is probably an odd number, and anything that lands on the space is probably an even number, and that's all I need to know. Really, that's all I need to know. And here again, we come back to what I said last week about gender. We have to know odd from even. We need to recognize odd with our eye. We need to recognize even with our eye. And once we can recognize odd or even, the way something looks, whether it looks odd or even, we can figure out what the number is. And that will help us, as a shortcut in the long run, to be able to read faster and faster and faster, and eventually, as I'm going to show you in a minute here, make the whole thing completely right brain rather than left brain. So then in the next measure, what's that note then?
7.
7. That's 2. Then 5. Then 1. 3. 7. Now I can't see through the paper anymore. Then that one is what?
6.
6. One ledger line below is 6. And then we have what? It's got to be an even number?
6.
6. That's an octave above the other number. And you see how it goes from a line 6 below to a space 6 above? That always happens with octaves. They change gender going from line to a space, from a space to a line. Okay, and then the next note is
1.
1. And then above that is
3.
a high 3. We would say that high 3. And what I would do is I would write that on a piece of paper as a 3 with a line over the top, saying it's going above the octave, so we know it's above. Okay. When we go down to the line, if I go below the line, any number below the line, if I'm writing it on a piece of paper, I would write that number and put a line underneath it to say it's going below 1. So from the bottom line to that top space is the normal numbers 1 through 7. If it goes above the high 1, I start putting lines over it. And if it goes below the low 1, I put lines under it. And that way, on a piece of paper with just numbers alone, I can notate 3 octaves worth of music. So anything I hear in my head, I can just write out as a number code immediately within 3 octave range. And then later transfer it to the paper. Okay, then the next one after the I3 is
7.
a 7, and then a 3, and a 2, even 6, odd 5, right? Then a 1, word changes. Then an odd number, 7, even number.
6.
See, by looking at the space or the line, I can tell whether it's odd or even. Okay, and then 3, 1, 6.
3.
That below 6 is
4.
4. That's a 4. 2 ledger lines below is 4. Then a 2 to a 1. Then we have a 6, a 5, a 3, a 4, a 2, and a 1. Did you get all that?